Hey guys, it's Coach Andre Adams here. I'm so excited for you guys to listen into this next episode. It's an update on our biochemical therapy or mineral balancing with Dr. Indigo Vasquez. We're going to be breaking down HTMA client progress and status updates, case examples. What are those strategic actions and tools we're using for our athletes? And again, just how can we optimize total performance, health, and wellness, especially on prep? I hope you guys really enjoy this episode. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys soon.
You're listening to the Peak Physique Podcast with Andre Adams on the NASM Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another exciting episode of the NASM Peak Physique Podcast. I'm your host, Andre Adams, NASM Master Trainer and IFBB Physique Olympian. If you guys recall, a few episodes back, we've had a very good friend of mine on, and we were talking about mineral balancing, HTMA analysis, which is hair tissue mineral analysis, and also what we like to call biochemical therapy. So today we've got a special treat for you. I am welcoming back to the show Dr. Indigo Vasquez, and we're going to break down everything you need to know about HTMA. Welcome back, Dr. Indy. How are we feeling?
Good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I thinking back, it's been around a year or so since we did that first episode, and I know we did like one little kind of status check-in. I think I used myself as the case example there. We talked about metabolic oxidation types and just high level, what does mineral balancing do? How can we apply it to athletes? So I'd say over the last year and a half, you and I have learned quite a bit, and I'm excited to share our case examples today.
Yeah, we've seen some fantastic improvements, some really neat recomps. It's going to be fun to show everyone the numbers.
Yeah, for sure. And for you guys that are watching on YouTube for this episode, you're in for a special treat because we actually prepared a slide deck so you can also get a visual as we're talking through some of these statistics and things that we've been focusing on with our athletes over the past year and a half. With that, we're going to dive right in. We've got our slide deck put together. And again, today we're going to really classify this as biochemical therapy. And just high level, Dr. Indy, why do we call it biochemical therapy?
Because we're working with biochemistry, right? We are putting together very complex, simple. I think in my mind, it maybe superficially seems simple, but it's very complex metabolic support. And it is from biochemistry.
Yeah, and there's that one chart. I know you've sent this to me recently where it shows all the different minerals and the interactions. And if you guys are interested, this is fascinating stuff, depending how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go. But you can always email us after this too. On Dr. Indy and myself would be more than happy to share some additional information on all this fun stuff.
Yes.
So just recapping, you guys know who I am, obviously. By now, I hope you know who Dr. Indy is. And together, we've been building something really special with our mineral balancing group that we've been working on, which is not exclusive to athletes, but we've been shifting our focus this year specifically on integrating these practices into our competition preps for athletes. So overview of what we're going to cover today, we're going to recap HTMA client progress and tracking. I'm so excited to share some of those examples from this year. Several of those are our own athletes and others that maybe are just really good case examples to follow, because we do get a variety of people that come to us with different issues. However, although everyone is unique and different, we do start to see certain trends and common denominators among athletes. So we'll dive into case examples. What strategic actions did we take based off of what we're seeing on those intake tests? And then what do those test tools and resources look like? Where do we start, right? When somebody's just not feeling good or they're struggling on prep, what tests can be run and shared with your provider or practitioner to get to the root cause, right? That's what we're here for. All right, so with that, Indy, the way I'd like to kick it off today is going into progress tracking. So we've got two clients that we've identified. One is myself. I'm going to take that male client because, again, you guys have been following my journey for the last year or so, and it's kind of fun to show the updates of real data. What are we doing with this, and how are we moving the needle? How is everybody feeling? And what are those, most importantly, what are those physique outcomes?
Mm-hmm.
So client one is actually a female client, one of our athletes. We're going to talk about, prep background, and then just preface some of the issues coming into prep this year, but also throughout a very aggressive prep. We had some challenges on timelines and things like this, that caused some other symptoms downstream, like GI distress, some outliers in the health biomarkers. So we're going to talk about what did we identify in those patterns, what were our testing methods, and then most importantly, what practical solutions did we implement throughout the course of prep. All right, so for that one, I'm going to have you take us away on this one, Indy. Let's talk about this particular patient, kind of where she started at, and throughout prep, you and I will talk about, from your perspective, my perspective, what things did we do to help manage, her stress and keep her progressing.
Yes, and I see this a lot in both male and female athletes, where we start in fast oxidation. And what that means is that the body is still keeping up with the demands of stress. You can see on the initial test that the calcium and magnesium was a little bit approaching the low side. So we were strategic about, how much fats we gave this athlete, how we supplemented. We knew that she was going into a pretty aggressive prep. I think the next couple of months moving forward after this test had become pretty aggressive. And as a result, when we retested, we saw her start to slip into the slower oxidation, which means her metabolism was going into a preservation mode. Her digestion was slowing down. Energy was kind of running out, essentially. And we were able to transition her supplements into a more strategized slow oxidizer and help her digestion and help keep her feeling energized and recomping while responding to prep.
Yeah, and this is an iterative process. So for us, we're part of that healing team where we work together to help athletes and each client really navigate these challenges on prep. Because for one, every prep you do is going to be different. You're going to run into different physiological responses, different time sensitivities. This is a perfect example of where, a very aggressive work schedule kind of dictated a very short, what I would consider a short prep timeline this year. And we'll talk about kind of starting and ending points too as we get later on to the slide deck. But we had roughly, 35 to 40 pounds of weight loss we had to get off in about 12 weeks. That's a tough prep, right? And this is for an IFBB pro stage, not a regional NPC stage. So to Indy's point, like things that we're looking for, we almost expect some of this shift to happen with the metabolic oxidation type. And for you, it's a matter of looking at not just the levels of each of these minerals, but also the ratios. And this can help you identify what the stress response is and where are we trending, right? How can we avoid burnout or overreach?
Yes, and you can actually see in the test, in this fast oxidizer state, that calcium to potassium ratio, you see how those bubbles are in that low range. That tells me, and it's counterintuitive as we've learned, that this tells me that the thyroid is actually keeping up with the demand of stress at this time. However, we're approaching, metabolic imbalance. Then you can see on the slow oxidizer side, calcium to potassium, see how those bubbles are in the high range. That means that the thyroid is no longer able to keep up with the demand of stress. And so it seems counterintuitive, right? However, we were able to adjust supplements to help her thyroid stay working optimized. I like to call it a hot metabolism. You could see it right there. The right underneath the sodium to magnesium ratio, it flipped. You see how and now it's in the low range. So we had to dive into more adrenal support, aggressive thyroid support. So it's really neat to see. No guessing, you can be very strategized.
And this, my friends, is the importance of retesting every 3 months, because we could put together the perfect strategy for you while you're in this fast oxidizer state. But 3 to 6 months goes by and you start to slip into mixed or slow oxidation, right? And so we can get ahead of it by, retesting. Otherwise, we might be continuing our therapy from the fast oxidizer state, and it's just not appropriate for you anymore.
And you get stuck. Yeah. And you can actually even see we had suspected that there might be some GI distress, and we could see that in that phosphorus level, which I think is really, really neat, that in that fast oxidation state, see how close to the line, the optimized line, that phosphorus level is. Moving into slow oxidation, see how it starts to come down. And so we said, okay, let's be mindful. If you start to have some GI distress, you're not going to the bathroom every day, this is exactly why, and this is exactly how to correct it.
Yeah, and this is good because, again, it gives us as coaches and practitioners the chance to be proactive instead of always reactive, right? On an aggressive 12-week prep, we don't want to put ourselves in a position where 4 weeks out, we're waiting for symptoms to hit and then trying to play catch up. When we can see these things coming down the pipeline, phosphorus is tanking, right? We're starting to see sodium and potassium dumping from the adrenals. This is a situation where we actually didn't see a huge spike in calcium, but oftentimes we'll see that as well, right? Calcium shell starting to approach. We can get ahead of things before they become bigger issues. So this is our roadmap, I like to say, between this, our blood work, our InBody, these are all tools that are very affordable. And if you're working with a good practitioner team, you can really elevate your prep to the next level. So we talked about this particular athlete shifting from fast into slow oxidation during really the early to mid part of this aggressive prep. And, she is one tough cookie. Like, it doesn't matter how hard it is. She's one of those athletes that's going to grind it out and do what needs to be done. And I'm notorious for that myself. But the reality is we can only put so much demand and stress on our body. And to your point, after we've exhausted that buffer, we start to actually approach overreach and burnout. Or, even if you're mentally able to push through, you just stop getting the result. Your body no longer is dropping weight. You're holding inflammation. You're chronically sore. You're starting to muscle waste. So now go ahead, Indy. Hop on in.
I was thinking, especially in the female athlete, the female physiology is so much more complex metabolically and hormonally than the male athlete. I'm not saying anything aside, we're not saying you guys aren't complex, but we know that the female is just so susceptible to stress because of the requirement in adrenal reserves to maintain a hormone health and digestion, thyroid health. So this is amazing for slowing down and ideally eliminating the need for serious hormone repair after you come off stage.
Absolutely. And we like to support that even during prep. So a lot of people always ask us this question when we present on this topic: is it okay for me to start mineral balancing? And should I be addressing these things now during prep, or do I need to wait until after? And the short answer is yes, we can start immediately, even though, yes, it's a bit counterintuitive. A lot of times, some of these things we might need to address more in the off season when we're trying to restore like HPO, HPA hormone axis. Obviously, if we're placing this heavy demand of inputs, right? High training, high cardio intensity and volume, we're putting this stress on our body. But that doesn't mean we can't continue to support it. And then also, this slide is a good representation of how we might recalibrate the diet to correspond with her current oxidizer state. So initially she was in fast oxidation. For that one, it's going to be a little bit higher percentage fats in her macronutrition, lower percentage carbs or carb cycling, and then, moderate normal proteins. However, if we would have kept on that strategy, those high fats would not do her much good when she's a slow oxidizer, right? We're trying to speed everything back up.
Yeah, and she was feeling that a little bit. There was a little bit of fatigue setting in. There was a little bit, I mean, she's not a complainer, but there was some feedback to suggest that we needed to shift. And lo and behold, we got the retest back. And as suspected, it was time for a shift. So it's.
And that's our job too, right? It's not just us telling athletes, hey, we have to do this, we have to do that. It's teaching athletes to be self-aware of how you're feeling. Be in tune with your body. You should assess yourself every day. Am I, chronically sore? Am I recovered today? Do I feel, extremely inflamed all week long? And so this type of feedback loop gives us more insights, and then we're smarter, more intelligent about what we're adjusting in their protocols, their diet. And to your point, when she reached out and started to notice, hey, I feel like I'm maybe not recovering as quickly as I was earlier in prep. And we did the updated HTMA as we just showed, and we start to realize, aha, there's actually a lot of potential upside here if we recalibrate this diet around a slow oxidizer protocol. And long story short, some of those changes included carb cycling. So instead of, because you got to remember, what's job number one? Get you fat-free and stage conditioned, right? We got to get lean first and foremost. No athlete, whether you feel good or bad, wants to get on stage fat or not lean, right? That's embarrassing. And also as an IFBB pro, that's our career. So that tends to take precedence, which is not always a good thing because we do end up running our bodies into the ground. But once we modified that, we made those adjustments, we went to a very strategic carb cycle. I'll give some specific examples there. On days that we needed to chase conditioning, specifically in the lower body, which is not uncommon for women due to estrogens, we would actually do depletion workouts. So high volume, moderate intensity, chasing depletion for legs and glutes, especially through the quads, right? For any pro division, we want to make sure we have definitely some good separation and density in those quads. And so what we would do then, the judges actually gave us feedback that they wanted to see more fullness in the upper body. So we recalibrated the diet, strategically pulled carbs out on her depletion days for lower body, and then added them back in on her upper body days. And it really balanced her physique. I'm going to actually show the in-body scan as a result of that, because she ended up adding an extra 2 to 3 pounds of muscle up top where we needed it while depleting the body fat that was stored in the legs. But the other benefit of that, and Indy, I'll let you talk to this, by strategically adding those carbs as we're approaching the burnout, what benefits does that give an athlete, from an adrenal and, just an overall CNS recovery perspective?
Yeah. So in slow oxidation, your body needs the glucose. It needs the carbohydrates to convert thyroid hormone into that active thyroid hormone. We need to support adrenal balance, which is, yes, of course, we're going to talk about blood sugar regulation, blood sugar balance, but a little bit higher carb, especially in slow oxidation, when your body is working on preserving energy, encourages your metabolism to feel safer. And then your metabolism is going to allow for recomp because you're giving it that strategy behind refeeding the carbohydrates.
Yeah, and from an aesthetic physique standpoint, refeeding those carbs also helps fill you back out, right? It floods the muscles back with glycogen again. And, we got to hit that 1 to 2 times a week. For me, things that I look for, which we'll show in subsequent slides here, are some of those biomarkers. So we want to push as hard as we can until we start to see 2 or more consecutive days of approaching overreach, where HRV is starting to tank, RHR, resting heart rate, is starting to come up, which is not good. And so we're keeping a pulse on how is our recovery and our central nervous system responding. So those are things, I would say, the more advanced side of prep that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about yet, but we're going to change that. That's why we're presenting here today.
That's the goal.
That's right. So recapping, slow oxidizer protocol generally does better with higher carbs, less fats, more stimulating supplements, aggressive gut support, right? We want to make sure we're avoiding a lot of the GI distress and slowed gastric emptying and indigestion, and then more rest and recovery. So that's got to be strategic, obviously, when you're mid-prep or you're 4 to 6 weeks out from a pro show. What do they say? No rest for the wicked, right? We've got to balance achieving the proper caloric deficit. So we have to have enough energy output, but at the same time, we need to strategically do it. And things that we'll see too is on the in-body, for example. I'm going to point out a few data points where when we were approaching those overreach moments, as this client was speaking up, we actually see a little bit of muscle wasting. And I know this is not the topic for today, but I want to talk about when we're approaching overreach like that. Let's weigh in on why we tend to avoid overdoing fasted cardio when we're seeing burnout patterns. We're seeing high cortisol spikes, excessively high. We're seeing muscle wasting on the in-body for 2 to 3 data points. So let's talk about why would we potentially shift some of that morning fasted cardio to later in the day or post-meal 1?
Yeah, for me, it's going to be, protecting the energy requirement for maintaining muscle. right? So there's so much energy that your body puts towards maintaining that muscle. And if we're in a slow oxidizer state, we are already preserving muscle, or excuse me, preserving energy. And the body is not going to put much energy towards preserving muscle. It's going to catabolize. It's going to say, well, we need to maybe store energy and put that towards body fat, just in case our brain and our liver and our, heart needs energy in the future. So for me, it's going to be preserving muscle through, strategically feeding the body. So I don't know what's your
Yeah,
take
no,
on that?
that's exactly right. And you see it all the time, because we hear the horror stories of athletes that are like, hey, everything was going great, but then, my progress started to plateau. So, my coach pulled more calories out and they're at 900 calories.
More
And then
cardio.
now they're doing 2.5, 3 hours of cardio on top of their lifting. And instead of progress, what we see is visceral fat goes up, skeletal muscle goes down, percent
As a
body fat.
protective mechanism.
Yeah, it's in famine mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where these things like strategic refeeds or carb bumps, sporadically as we're starting to approach that phase, is actually going to give you a boost in insulin sensitivity. It's going to give you a boost in leptin sensitivity and other hormone signaling to keep your body anabolic, right? We don't want to be breaking down amino acids from lean muscle tissue and converting into glucose, which is ultimately what happens. So that's one of the reasons that we do tend to limit, or actually we start to rotate or phase out some aggressive fasted cardio a couple weeks out from show when possible, to try and avoid those extreme excessive cortisol spikes and muscle wasting. Moving forward with biometrics. I love this chart. So these are some of the tools that we use, and we're analytical. This particular client also loves data, so it works out perfect. But it just kind of highlights, recapping what we talked about. This data set is actually from the last pro show date to, I think, early this past week. And the reason that I chose this selection is to show how the body responds to carbs and less training inputs. So again, when we're approaching overreach or burnout, even if it's mid prep, we schedule deload weeks or deload days, refeed days. We might bring calories up to maintenance for 48 hours. The reason we're doing this is to, again, give some support to those adrenals, central nervous system, and then hormone signaling. And if I look at this, these four charts here, right? Let's start on the bottom left. We've got resting heart rate. With resting heart rate, immediately you see on August 17th, as soon as those refeeds were introduced post-show, what happens? We see this huge decline in RHR, which means her body's recovering, her central nervous system starting to calm down. And simultaneously, we see the HRV inversely proportional, right? We get this sharp climb up, and she's actually got a beautiful HRV. I wish mine
I was like, that is amazing.
Some of those numbers. So, but it's crazy how fast your body can respond, especially coming out of a show, right? We're hypersensitive to all kinds of things. And when we reintroduce food, we did taper down actually about 10 days out. And we were between shows for this particular one. Peaked out beautifully, which you'll see in a moment, but we tapered down all of our cardio and training inputs 30 to 40%. And then obviously not training one day out, not training on show day, of course, and then just taking 1 to 2 days complete deload after the show. But the Whoop scores, right? You see those recovery scores shoot up. She's floating around 100% there the last couple of days, which we haven't seen that for a couple months. So it's
amazing.
Beautiful data to see. So I encourage you guys that are listening, if you've got your smart wearables, you've got Fitbit, Apple Watch, Garmin, Oura Ring, any of these things, track your data and try this out. Go through maybe 3 or 4 really low carb depletion days, push yourself in the gym, add in your higher amounts of cardio and volume, track your scores. You should see them start to trend in an unfavorable direction typically. But when you have that refeed, I want you to pay attention to what happens, especially if you're staying good and hydrated and getting good sleep on top of that. And you should notice all of these trends shifting back the right directions again. All right. And this one I just threw in here for fun. Same client here. We looked at, increase. So I'll just summarize here. The takeaways were an increase in skeletal muscle. But if you look at the bottom left, which was, dating back to probably around early January, I want to say, through late spring, early summer, you see the body fat trending down from 21.2 down to 12%. but it took a little dip in muscle mass, right? And this is what we were fighting because of the aggressive timeline. We have to get the weight off, right? No matter what, we got to make sure that we're at least in shape coming into the show. Very tight timeline, and it's a balancing act. We got to push harder here. Oh, we need more delts. Oh gosh, the judges told us we need more quad sweep. So we got to push harder on these areas. But at the same time, we got to boost up your recovery. It's kind of counterintuitive. So this is where you and I had to get surgical with strategic carbs, strategic minerals, all of our, let's highlight some of our self-care strategies, because that was a huge role in here. Breath work, we got red light therapy, Epsom salt baths, we've got infrared sauna, contrast therapy.
Yeah, we want hormetic, right? We want hormesis. We don't want, like, sauna, for instance, for this client is, 10, 15 minutes. We don't want to spend 30 minutes of hard sauna. We want to condition the adrenals to feel safe, and a gentle sauna, morning sunlight exposure, the breath work, legs up the wall. She did it. She did all of it.
Yeah, and it helped. I don't think we would have had such a successful prep season without those. And here's the beauty in it, in that really challenging prep. If we look at the gap from the last two data points, so, the most recent one being the scan on the right, which was just last week, and we see the muscle shoot back up from 62 to almost 66 pounds, so 3.5, 4 pounds of muscle in a cut, in a caloric deficit. And at the same time, body fat came down from 12% down to 8%. And this was about 1 to 2 weeks post show. So she was somewhere in the mid 7s on stage, which is insane to think about. In a caloric deficit, we're able to literally build muscle into the show. And I put some notes there because this was just fun. If you look at the segmental lean analysis, that's going to be our muscle distribution. And you see on the left, it was a little bit more in line top to bottom, which normally sounds like a good thing, right? We're like, all right, we're pretty symmetric, well proportioned top to bottom. However, the judges gave us very specific feedback. They wanted more fullness. They wanted a bigger upper body for the pro stage. And so you can see that huge shift. You see about 2 pounds of extra muscle on the right, all in the upper body, which is lats, shoulders, and arms. So, just taking their advice, different volumes and frequencies, different training intensities for upper versus lower. If we look at the lower, I think the body fat might have got cut off on here, but we had about 2.6 pounds of body fat in the right leg, left leg back at that last data point. And then we look at the most current one, and it dropped all the way down to like 1.5 pounds or something. So pretty much cut it in half and brought her in super tight, which you guys can see here, right? So roughly 3 shows plus 1 guest posing appearance over that 20-week span. So about 5 months here, right? March through August, I believe. And you can see a 40-pound weight difference, which is just insane to think about, right? And you see from the front, side, back, we're checking all the boxes. And you can really see it illustrated here when we're talking about upper body fullness. Even though on the in body, in this case, it shows upper body dominance, aesthetically, it's not dominant. She's very balanced, very well proportioned. If anything, could probably go even bigger on the upper body. So these are the things that we're looking at, all these tiny little details that get an athlete from point A to point B. Some key takeaways there we'll highlight before we move on is prep summary. Again, roughly 20 weeks. We did 3 IFBB pro shows. We did 1 guest posing appearance in there just for fun. Starting weight was around 162 pounds coming out of off season, and we finished at 122. Actually, the prep low was about 119 pounds. But we wanted her good and full for those last couple shows. So filled her out on stage, 122 pounds, net loss 40 pounds. And that's what I would call a moderately aggressive pace for you guys that have taken the PBC course. You know that we target somewhere around 0.5 to 1.5% weight loss per week on an average prep. This one, we had to get more aggressive to meet the timelines, and it was 1.5 to 2 pounds weight loss per week. Starting body fat percentage was 23%. We finished at 7 to 8%, roughly a 15% body fat reduction, which is right in that sweet spot of 0.5 to 1, right? So it's 0.75% body fat reduction per week consistently. And it's fun. I actually should have showed her her weight increase and losses over the last like 2 to 3 seasons, because it's so repeatable. It's beautiful to see. Like if we go back to 2022 or 2023, you see this nice linear growth, post show coming up from like 120 pounds to 155, 160 that first season, and then a nice linear gradual cut into the show. This one, we had to have a much steeper cut coming back into the show, but we produced the correct result, and we would not have been able to do that without mineral balancing and a lot of the other things we implemented.
Yeah, I remember, I don't know if I can't remember if bloods are on this, these slide decks, but oh my gosh, I saw those blood labs and I was like, looks so good.
Yes. In fact, even speaking of blood labs, I know we'll do a very quick highlight of my own, changes. And I remember this year, for you guys that followed along, I went to Hong Kong, shot some content for one of my sponsors out there, Expedience. And I did a cut. I did a mini prep for about 8 weeks for that. And my blood work looked so good before and after. I was thrilled. So, it's being proactive, not reactive, and waiting for damage. We'll leave this one with those summary notes. Again, short and aggressive prep due to restricted timelines, mostly driven by work. Aggressively supported recovery, energy, hormones. We get this a lot, but HPO and HPA axis, especially for our females, but this is for anybody. Very important to us to make sure that we're supporting correct hormone function. Leptin and insulin signaling, again, we don't want to have burnout and make our bodies hypersensitive to fat gain coming out of a show. So all of these things were very strategically added. Mineral balancing, carb cycling, strategic deloads, definitely had some refeeds. Who doesn't like refeeds? And then, using those biomarkers, and then of course, weekly check-ins and that open feedback loop that we have with our athletes to communicate how they're feeling, energy, digestion, progress, all that good stuff. But we recommend also coming out of the show, for you guys that maybe are still new to this, I like HTMA and blood work. I like to time it 4 to 6 weeks post-show. You could do it immediately post-show. However, there might be some erroneous things just from the extreme, prep-induced stress that's happening in the body. So for me, I've realized that about 4 to 6 weeks is my sweet spot where my body's stable there. And I think it's more representative of where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so client 2, we'll kind of speed through mine. We don't need to go into the details. No, we're going to go through this. So you guys remember, I was in fast oxidation, and the one on the left, actually, that HTMA, and to give me kind of just quick highlights, seeing copper, anything related to renals or whatnot that, might affect my prep.
Yes, so we could see true copper deficiency in your initial mineral test, and I think that's probably going to be something that we experience for forever and ever. However, we could, your body was really fighting hard to keep up with the demands. You were approaching all 4 highs, the first 4 macro minerals high, where you are in a volatile state at that point, where we're really sensitive metabolically. You're not sensitive, but your metabolism was. And so we had to take quite a bit of supplement out. I think it was feeding a little bit of metabolic imbalance. So we did some strategy behind your macros. We put you on more fats. We gave you, more copper rich foods. We gave you copper. We took away your vitamin C's, the zinc, that sort of thing, to condition your metabolism a little bit. And it took us about I'm guessing this was a year.
Yeah, 1 full year.
And this, you're in mixed oxidation, which it actually mixed fast oxidation. And I prefer a client or a patient to be in mixed fast oxidation, because you're a little bit fast, a little bit slow. Your central nervous system is in a balanced state. You're not fight or flight. If you go and you experience a stress, you're back into parasympathetic dominance pretty easily. You can see that in your calcium to phosphorus ratio on the bottom there, on that right side, how it's in that ideal zone. That speaks profoundly to a metabolism, to recovery, to muscle building. So you're currently in a perfect state. I saw that and I was like, oh my gosh, of course.
Yes, and this is the beauty in this. So recapping for you guys, we're trying to push everyone into, towards that kind of mixed oxidation state where we're not swinging the pendulum one way or the other to one extreme end. And I can tell you that my energy feels good. Right now I'm not actively prepping for anything yet, and we ain't done yet, but I feel good. And again, it's all about balance right now. So there's some things that you find out about yourself that you're, to Dr. Indy's point, you may have to continue to work on from now till forever. It's no different than a physique goal, right? If you weren't blessed as a bikini competitor with great glutes, you might be chasing upper glutes or glute density for the rest of your career.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's no different with the mineral balance, right? Especially given certain lifestyle factors, habits, genetics. But this is why we're always pushing towards that mixed oxidation state.
Yes, and we're never done, right? We're always chasing the improvement.
That's right. So this is actually a really good breakdown. These were kind of some of your summary notes when we look at specific minerals, previous to current. Where did that change occur, and then what's the interpretation like? What does that mean, right? If there's any, I know you covered some of them there, but if there's any that really stand out here, related to insulin sensitivity, thyroid function, right? So selenium actually went up, which indicated better thyroid conversion and detox pathways. And that is very intentional because I take my selenium every single day. The copper, that one I struggle with. And, some of it in the beginning was also the inhibition due to high amounts of zinc and vitamin C. And it's one that I think confuses or a lot of people are shocked when they hear that not everyone should be taking high dose vitamin C and zinc. And it's just so marketed that way, right? For immune supplements and cold and flu season. But the reality is that you could be causing further damage and inhibiting progress in other areas.
Right, exactly. And for you, the big one we focused on is your central nervous system. In terms of copper, I don't know. I think there's probably maybe like a genetic ceruloplasmin protein thing that is going to be a forever focus. But you could see that through mineral balancing, that thyroid potential increased, your insulin sensitivity increased. We improved your body's ability to recover and manage stress, and I think that's profound. I mean, we both speak to having a buffer around the nervous system, where high functioning individuals, where we have families and we are in prep and we have to be ideal in our job. It can wear you down, but if you have a buffer around your nervous system, if you take care of your metabolism, if you're strategic, if you do your recovery, your brain and body will give you the output that you're asking it to without detriment. So this speaks profoundly to that, where you strategize. You can still be, a gangster in everything, always. However, there's no serious damage associated with it.
Right. And again, it depends on everyone's goals, but I think everyone on this planet definitely struggles with energy at times. We all struggle with digestion at times, right? And everyone wants to look and feel their best. So all of these things that we're adjusting ideally are going to help balance your energy and force your body to just work better as a system. And there's so much. So for you guys that maybe haven't heard about our biochemical group, our mineral balancing group, we go so deep down the rabbit hole on other things that are just related to overall health and wellness, whether it just be, homeopathic things. It might be grounding, it could be breath work, it could be peptide therapies. There's so much involved.
Spices.
Yes, by herbs and spices. There's so many fun things. So we, again, encourage you guys just, connect with us, ask questions. Actions taken on this one, we won't spend too much time here, but, looking again at those improvements. Calcium dropped, right? So again, we're not approaching calcium shell. This is a good thing. Chromium and selenium had increased, which means better blood sugar utilization and management, better detox potential. And we've had a few other ratios that moved favorably. And then a few things we'll call that still need work, right? Kind of some homework for me to continue during this therapy. So the adrenal cocktails too, those are really good. Earlier on this chat, we talked about, spiking cortisol too high due to fasted cardio and high amounts of cardio, or hitting the afternoon wall where you just all of a sudden fall off a cliff and you're extremely fatigued. The adrenal cocktails are something that you can definitely add in to help buffer cortisol, support your adrenals from burning out. And you can do these up to 1 to 2 times a day. And there's different recipes too. We've actually got a very low sugar one where you can put some low sugar coconut water, some Redmond sea salt. But you want basically to support with potassium and sodium, obviously hydration, electrolytes, and that's going to help just jumpstart your adrenals and again buffer some of that cortisol.
Mhm.
So very good stuff there. And phosphorus, touch on that one because that one was important for me.
Yeah, so we saw actually an increase in cobalt and a decrease in phosphorus, which told us that there was, due to the energy expenditure, lower protein synthesis, right? So the proteins that you were consuming may had not been broken down very well. It may have caused some GI distress. So we were able to pivot there and make sure that we supplemented strategically, and then of course make sure that the proteins that you're eating were being allocated towards the goal that we were working towards.
Exactly. If you're not getting good digestion and uptake, we're not putting those nutrients to use, and then we're ultimately not absorbing and going to see the results. All right. If you guys are just joining us, this is the Peak Physique Podcast, and we've got Dr. Indigo Vasquez, aka Dr. Indy, on the call today, and we're doing some catch-up, recapping all of the movement that we've seen this year in our biochemical therapy or HTMA mineral balancing group. So we've got some really good case examples that we want to highlight here. We went through a couple full progress updates from myself and one of our elite athletes. And this one, I want to take a moment to acknowledge some of the scenarios that we get, right? And these are difficult, complex things. So we definitely have to put our heads together to kind of peel back the layers of that onion and figure out what the best strategy, the best test, and ultimately formulate a solution. Mm-hmm. So scenario one here, one of our relatively new female elite athletes, new to us, not new to being an elite athlete. Some of the conditions that we've seen in this individual when she came to us: hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, so some autoimmune issues, chronic fatigue and inflammation, energy, libido issues, definitely some food and GI sensitivities, hypothalamic amenorrhea, there's stalled weight loss, insulin resistance, definitely some cravings, which tells me that there's probably a bit of leptin resistance. And most of these things are likely prep induced from past aggressive preps that just didn't address or support these things throughout the course. And then of course the rebound, right, coming out of those shows. If you're not supporting all of these things, your hormone signaling and restoring each of those axes, you can get yourself into some long-term chronic situations, which is what we're seeing here. Mm-hmm. So let's start with this individual. And I think the first thing is, we've identified the symptoms. And for you and I, the next step is let's figure out what tests we want to do to help, find what the root cause of each of these symptoms is.
Yeah, so we ran a host of tests. And I believe if this is the individual we're thinking of, that most of those tests came back shockingly kind of balanced, right? Where the cortisol, the diurnal pattern didn't look terrible. There was some inflammation, sure, yes, but where was that coming from? And if we go deeper and we do a mineral test, which is three months of metabolic data versus a snippet in time, and we could see that there is a severe calcium shell. And you could do all of the stimulants in the world, all of the things that to help with weight loss and gut. But if we don't break that calcium shell, which is very, very heavy calcium loss, this individual will not feel better. She will not, her energy will remain low. It is a protective state. So we say, okay, we're going to focus on all of these things in the future, but first, before we do any of that, we have got to break this calcium shell, which might take a little bit of time. But when we do that, her metabolism is going to feel so good. Her gut is going to feel so good. She's just going to feel like she used to before her body went into this deep preservation mode.
Yeah, and it's crazy. You mentioned, just kind of feeling good, and then the gut. And we talk about it sometimes, but I don't think it's talked about enough. When we talk about the brain-gut axis, if you're not feeling good, you're also going to slow gastric emptying. You're going to have high cortisol. You're going to have poor digestion, and these things are connected. So if we can start to chip away and we get the gut responding a little bit better, emotionally, we feel better, right? Our brain chemistry is improved. And now you start to build this snowball effect where your body's just firing on all levels, right? All cylinders. But definitely a strong brain gut axis. And I think that feeds into this because when you're constantly tired, you're constantly bloated, you have no energy to peel yourself out of bed, the last thing you want to do is go hop on a treadmill for an hour, right? Or go try to have a really hard leg day when you don't have energy. So we're addressing each of these one by one by utilizing strategic testing to get to these root causes. And even us at this point, I'll say this, without even doing the test, there's at least a handful of things that we can usually suspect that are common denominators, right? We've seen it enough times. Like, I think before she even told us this, we're like, all right, she's probably in slow oxidation, definitely has some patterns of hypothyroidism. We can start to, probably in a calcium shell. So we can start to identify some things, and then this just substantiates it with evidence-based practice, which is what we're.
And pulling back, you're really great with this in coaching, where you say, okay, pulling back will actually yield greater results, which can be pretty scary. I mean, when I do some online coaching as well, and when I tell a client, hey, we're gonna not do an hour and 15, we're gonna go 45 minutes, and we're gonna pull back to 50%, and it can be scary, and we trust the process, watch what happens, and then we see that scale come down because the body is feeling recovered and feeling safe, which is going to upregulate that metabolism.
Oh, absolutely. It's not prioritized enough. And for you guys that are coaching, or if you're an athlete yourself, if you're having issues with that, because to Indy's point, sometimes less yields more. That's a weird counterintuitive concept to grasp, because for bodybuilding, we always think it's got to be extreme, right? In order to be an elite athlete, I have to be more extreme than the other elite athletes. It's not always the case. So
work smarter.
Yeah, exactly. Work smarter. We're not saying don't work hard, but work, if you work hard in the wrong direction, it can still take you to the wrong place, the wrong destination. So we want to make sure we're putting all of that energy into the right place. If you're ever confused too on cardio, you heard our conversation on cortisol and adrenal cocktails and things like this. You can also consider other modalities or forms of energy expenditure. The obvious one is diet, right? We can always pull a lever on diet if we need to. But once we get to a certain threshold, we might not want to pull any more calories out. So then we have to start looking at things like NEAT energy expenditure, right? So it's going to be that non-exercise activity thermogenesis. If you don't have a very active lifestyle, you sit at a desk job all day, maybe think about getting a walking pad, take the dog for a walk after dinner. There's other ways to get that step count and that energy output without just slamming fasted cardio until you run your body in the ground. Because I can promise you this, all of the things that are on this list, you will exacerbate and make worse if you continue to add stress and add stimulus on top.
Yeah, you cannot beat the body into submission. Right. Traditionally, right? I mean, we do in the sport. We are hard on the body. However, we cannot beat it into submission. We have to be strategized. We have to be smart about working with that perfect ancient metabolism that is designed to keep you alive. We find respect in that. We work with it.
Exactly. Well, good. And scenario 2 here, we're not going to spend much time on this because it's very similar to scenario 1. I wanted to point it out, though, to show that we do have common things that we come across. And unfortunately, it is more common in the industry than not to have, athletes that are prescribed way too much of everything, too much supplements, sometimes not enough food. If it's off season, sometimes it's way too much food. But it's these extremes. And for scenario 2, this particular athlete, who's also extremely, high potential, high caliber athlete, has done very well in the past, but started to really, really approach like total burnout. And we're just starting our therapy for this individual. But even as we're awaiting some of the HTMA results, we can identify some of those patterns. And there's also some blood labs that confirm some of those suspicions, right, with the hypothyroidism. But the main things were severe chronic fatigue, difficulty getting out of bed, no energy to train, no energy to push intensity on cardio, full hormone suppression. These lead me to believe there's things like adrenal fatigue definitely happening here, then bloating, chronic GI disruption, all of those things, again, that we suspect could be pushing her towards burnout, which will reveal itself in the HTMA. But, again, be cautious, be careful, make sure that you're testing, because we want to avoid these scenarios before they become issues. And it's not as complex as this is. It's also not rocket science. Right? If our bodies are too taxed and they're too stressed, the simple solution is pull back a little bit, right? and pump the brakes a little bit. Give yourself a little more time. Instead of a 12-week cut, maybe do an 18 or a 20-week cut. So just keep that in mind. Tools and resources will highlight, again, HTMA mineral analysis. I want you to comment quickly because we see these and they can be complementary and useful in some ways. However, the way that we perceive and use them is probably different than most people. So GI mapping, we had one client that had to do a SIBO test, food sensitivity test. What are the pros and cons versus HTMA?
So I like GI mapping. I like SIBO testing. Food sensitivity testing, I'm pretty loud about it. I don't really like it because if you have dysbiosis or inflammation, you're going to pop hot with a lot of the foods that you're consuming. You're going to see that there are no-nos or sensitivities in a food sensitivity test. So we can leverage them strategically. However, we want to be really careful about how we integrate the information, right? So instead of maybe taking a 6-week break on those food sensitivities, going in and doing really aggressive repair, we're adding NAG, we're adding sodium butyrate, we're adding things to repair the mucosal lining so that we don't have to take out these really, really good for you foods. And we don't want to encourage eating disorder or I can't have anything, and that can become a big problem. So I'm not a fan of food sensitivity testing. I will order them if people want them. That's fine. But that's my take on the food sensitivity. Come at me if you want to, but that's how I approach it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's understanding the data that's in front of you within context, right? And if you understand the data, then you can speak to it intelligently, and we can make smart, informed decisions on how we might choose to integrate that into a prep. But most people don't understand it, and they just see the result, and it's like, oh gosh, there's 25 foods that I have a sensitivity or a potential allergen. I'm never going to eat these, right?
Yeah.
No more strawberries, no more carbs, no more. It's like, no. Actually, a lot of these are self or prep induced from having too much of these things for extended periods of time. And if we just temporarily pull them, right? And then maybe what's our rule of thumb? Take them out for maybe 6 weeks and then once per week, right? We might phase in one, kind of like coming out of a contest prep. It's very similar to what we do coming out of a show.
And that's how you actually find your food sensitivities. Now, if they're IgA, like they're allergies, you can't have them. But, a little bit at a time. If strawberries, if that's your thing and you miss strawberries and we take them out for 6 weeks, we repair. You're going to bring strawberries in 3 times a day for 3 days, and you write them down on your notepad, yes or no, or maybe. That's how you actually identify those food sensitivities, I think in a healthier way.
Yeah, I agree. So don't panic if you get one of those. We just wanted to give you some context on how we would interpret it. Yes. And of course, other tools and resources that we rely heavily on, complete blood work, especially if there's very acute or specific things we want to monitor a little bit more closely in serum levels. Weekly check-ins, that's our feedback loop. That's our opportunity to be transparent, open with our clients and force them to think critically and self-assess. How are you feeling? What things can we do to support you? Monitor biomarkers. We saw that, right, with HRV, resting heart rate, our Whoop scores, our sleep, our step count, all that good stuff. And then cortisol versus adrenals. A lot of times it could be one or the other or both. I like to delineate. Some of the tests we might use would be a 4-point saliva test or Dutch test. And then we can see, is that cortisol production peaking and dropping within the band that we want? And if so, then it's probably an adrenal issue that we're having. But if it's truly an outlier there, maybe it really is a cortisol issue, right? So it gives us, again, just a little bit more information so we can take a more appropriate course of action instead of just guessing. All right, so summary, let's summarize this. So testing to identify root causes of symptoms. Again, this helps us and the clients navigate those challenges collaboratively because this isn't a dictatorship. It's not us telling you, do this, do that. It's us working with you to navigate those challenges that you're facing on a weekly basis so that we can come up with the best solution together. Applying those insights. So all of the testing, once we get all the data back, it's really applying the insights and integrating those into your training program and then your overall health, right? So your nutrition, your supplementation protocols, all of these things come down to that integration step, which is the most important step. Because you might have some things that could be optimal for your health or for balancing even your HTMA, but we have to strategically place them mid-prep, post-show, off-season, whatever it might be. So that's where we work together as a team. And then I think one of the most important things, you've hit on it a few times today, Indy, is making sure that we keep an open and safe environment for communication and client feedback. One thing that you and I run into all the time is people might leave a coach, not because the coach didn't necessarily understand how to do their job, but because they didn't feel safe. You know, if they question something or their body's not responding, they're afraid to maybe share that information because they feel like they're going to get judged or yelled at or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think that we want to encourage people to know that they're in control of their health. I like to teach. I like to empower. Ask me questions. If it doesn't make sense, let's talk about it. And if it still doesn't make sense, then maybe we do something else. That's okay. We're here to empower and teach. That's where we're coming from. So we work well together in implementing that strategy, and as a result, I feel like our team is doing really well.
Yeah, and you know, everyone, especially the ones that have stuck with it long enough, because I'll also say that, right? These aren't things like, you know, mineral balancing isn't like going to the store and buying a pre-workout and instantly you feel it and you're like, oh wow, I feel wired. These are long-term things that we put in place to help protect your body and help optimize your overall long-term health, right? So it's things that you do need to stick with, you know, just out of the gate, minimum 3 months, but we like to go definitely longer than that. As you've seen with my own HTMA, it took me a full year to really move the needle where we needed to go. And, you know, maybe once you're in that kind of mixed oxidative state, now maybe we can start to pull back and instead of every 90 days, maybe you're in a maintenance plan and it's every, 4 to 6 months. But if you can do it, every 90 days is ideal for your mineral balancing.
Yeah, and this is something that can be taken, with you. It's a tool that should be taken with you for the rest of your life, because there is life after sport, and we want to make sure that your heart and your liver and your brain are all healthy. So at the end of the day, if we're not in your life, find mineral testing, because it is going to speak the most profound to your overall wellness and your longevity deep into your mature age.
Yeah, and that's where we got to get our athletes to think. I was that athlete at 25, and I'm not thinking about 50. I'm not even thinking about 40 at 25. I'm thinking about 25, right? What are we doing right now? Let's go extreme. But as we get more mature, we get older, the health priority starts to shift towards health and longevity.
Our hips start making more noise, and we're like, oh.
Yeah. Hey, this year, for you guys that don't know, I had a quad tear racing my daughter, and I'm 40 now. And so it's like little things that are nothing normally, right? You just get up and daughter wants to race. Let me show her who's boss.
You sneeze, and you got like a 3 weeks out of the kid.
Maybe because my potassium or my calcium was too low. Who knows?
It's possible.
So make sure that you're staying on top of that health, guys. It is the most important thing. And as we age, it becomes even more vital to take command of your health. So if you guys are interested in learning more, also, you want to hear more from Dr. Indy or myself, you can also there's a special code. It's NASM PPP, and that's at that teamadamsprep.com/biochemtherapy. So if you guys go to that, you'll be able to learn more about biochem therapy, some of the thoughts and concepts behind everything that we talked about today. And Dr. Indy, with that, let's let the followers know where they can find you, where can they contact you and get connected.
Yes, so you can always apply at the teamadamsprep.com website. I love Instagram messaging. You can email me, but DMing me directly is going to be the fastest way to contact me. So follow me on IG.
All right, you heard it there. And for you guys that are maybe unsure, you don't have to be part of Team Adams to take advantage of this information. This is for everybody. So we do work with people to do prep integrations. If you're not an athlete and you're just a lifestyle client or fitness enthusiast, this is still a great strategy for you to employ in your own fitness journey. So again, reach out, and you guys already know where you can find me. Instagram, it's going to be at @AndreAdams_official or teamadams_prep. You can email me at trainingbydre@gmail.com. And YouTube is also Andre Adams _official. And guys, as always, if you felt like you got value and you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to share it with at least one friend. Tell them how awesome this episode was and what you learned today. And we thank you all for tuning in. As always, we'll see you next time on the Peak Physique Podcast.